So let me just make one more little video here in this set, and then I'm going to pause and give you a couple of days to breathe and absorb this a little bit. But I want to pursue just a little bit more before I stop this set, this matter of general relativism and general absolutism. Now again, I want to make clear, general relativism, it's a view that I think is going to fall apart as you think about it. It's going to have pretty easy to see difficulties. Now it's not a view that I'm giving to you because professional philosophers would hold this view, but it is a view that you might run into. Like again, talking to a reasonably smart friend who's thought a bit about this. That you might have a reasonably smart friend who's like, we could be on the head of a pin of some god. There might not be rocks and trees and electrons and planets. We could be under a grand illusion. And that's why your friend might say, you should be a relativist like me. The truth is perception. There are rocks and trees because we say there are rocks and trees. There are electrons because we say there are electrons. The earth is spherical because we say the earth is spherical. Your friend might say, you need to be humble about this and realize we could be all wrong about all this stuff. So perception is reality. We could be on the head of a pin of some god. There are rocks and trees because we say there are. There are electrons because we believe it. That's reality for now. It's almost like it's a small r reality. Big R reality, capital R reality. Your friend might say, I don't even know how you think you could get to that. We could be on the head of a pin of some god. Okay, now what I just said, the words I just put into the mouth of your semi-smart friend, those were all mixed up. I don't know if you sensed anything going awry there, but what I just said, that we could be on the head of a pin of some god, which by the way is true, your friend's right about that, I think you should think. We could be on the head of a pin of some god, but then when your friend turns right around and says, so you should be a relativist, you should be a general relativist and realize there are rocks and trees because we say there are. Perception is our reality. That's all we got. That's all we can get is just our perceptions. So our perception is reality, and that's why you should be a general relativist, says your friend, because after all, we could be wrong about everything. Okay. The two sides of that are contradictory, the two sides of what I just said. So I'll come back to that, but perhaps you can even begin to sense why your friend can't say both of those things together. That we could be on the head of a pin of some god, and then turn right around and claim something like what we're calling general relativism. So this is not a view that a professional philosopher is going to hold. That's not why I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you because your friends who have thought a bit about this might think that something like general relativism seems very clear, that perception is reality, and reality changes over time. And all we've got is small r reality. Big R reality is not within our power. We don't have a God's eye perspective. We just got 5 fallible senses. Okay, so something like what your friend is saying is true and correct, but then they step across a line with general relativism from which they can't recover. So let's see what you think. But what I've done here is I've gone ahead and said, here's how to pursue this. When someone is, I made general relativism sound as good as I could make it sound in the last video. I was preaching at you about the need for humility, the need to recognize that reality does change over time and perceptions change over time, and people are going to look back at us in the same way that we look back on people 1,000 or 10,000 years ago. And that should humble you. It should make you respectful of the diversity of views and tolerant. So, okay, what goes wrong with general relativism then? I've made it sound as good as I can make it. But now's the time to turn to what the problem potentially is here. And to see that, what you got to do is this. You got to go ahead and give a precise definition. You got to take this perception as reality notion and put it into good, clear language. Now, your friend's not going to like that. Often people find very clear language and the pursuit of very clear language to be tedious and even maybe to miss the point. But you've got to. When your friend says perception is reality and they're preaching at you about general relativism the way I have, you have to say, okay, now let me get this straight. Here's what you mean to be saying. Now, in the reading that I've typed up for you, Relativism and Absolutism, I spell this out very clearly in the following way. I say, look, let's let this be the definition of general relativism. What your friend seems to be saying is this. Now again, this language is going to seem tedious to people who aren't really interested in getting to the truth here. But what your friend seems to be saying is, for any statement S, not just moral statements, by the way, now we're talking about general relativism. Remember, we want to get back to moral relativism, to cultural moral relativism, but first we're going to ask this question, is there a bigger kind of relativism that's going to swallow everything up, all truth? So your friend is saying, yeah, general relativism, and it goes like this, not just for moral statements, for any statement S. For any statement S, like these, S1, S2, S3, Earth is flat, electrons exist, there are rocks and trees. We'll add some more to this list later, but just any statement that you might think of. Obviously, short shorts are wrong is going to go here. That's one of the ones that, already you feel a little weird about calling absolutely true rather than relatively true. But let's just start with simple ones like this. For statements like S1, S2, S3, for any of those where P1 and P2 are, P1, everyone believes that S, P2, S is true, and P1 means P2. P1 means the same thing as P2. So think about this. This is the claim that perception is reality. This is just another way of saying when we perceive electrons to exist, S2, when we believe it, that's the same thing as it being true. P1 and P2 are really the same thing. So if you ask your general relativist friend, do electrons exist? And they'll say, well, that's our perception. Our perception is that electrons exist. Everyone believes that electrons exist. Let's just pretend that's true. Let's give this the best chance we can. Let's pretend everybody does think electrons exist or that rocks and trees exist. For everyone to believe it is just the same thing as it being true. So if you ask your friend, does everyone believe electrons exist? Your friend's going to go, yeah, that's why they exist, because we perceive it. And if you were to say, but is it really true? Do they really exist? Your friend's going to say, if your friend is really a general relativist, they're going to say, I don't even understand the question. What do you mean, do they really exist? We believe they exist. We perceive them. Perception is reality. So their existence is established as much as it can be established by our belief, by our perception. I mean, think about this. What else could perception as reality mean? I mean, if taken literally, this is what it seems to mean. Whenever we perceive something, that's the same thing as it being true. Now, sometimes with some kinds of sentences, that might seem right. Like imagine dinner etiquette sentences. Salad fork goes outside the dinner fork. Okay, you might say, well, if the group says that the salad fork goes outside the dinner fork, then it does, because dinner etiquette is something that does seem maybe relative to our beliefs and perceptions. With dinner etiquette, it does seem like our perception is the only kind of establishment of truth that there could be. If we perceive that the dinner fork goes inside the salad fork, then it does. And if you said, but does it really? Does the salad fork really go outside the dinner fork? You might say, I don't understand the question. I mean, if we believe it does, that's what makes it true that it does. So with dinner etiquette, maybe you can kind of feel that relativism, that for everyone to believe it is for it to be true. But does it work that way for the earth being flat, the shape of the earth? Scientific claims like electrons exist, or common sense observations like there are rocks and trees. I think those aren't going to work like dinner etiquette. So, but keep dinner etiquette in mind as we go through these discussions as kind of the touchstone case of something that kind of does seem like it's made up by us. And you wouldn't go to another culture, for instance, and say, oh, you guys are eating all wrong. You're mistaken about how to eat. If you come from a culture where salad fork goes outside a dinner fork, you know, it would be if you went to another culture and said, you guys are eating incorrectly. The response might well be incorrect compared to what? Compared to how you eat? Not interesting. You're misunderstanding how dinner etiquette works. It's not written in the sky, it's made up. It's made up by us. Okay, but are statements in general, the truth of statements in general, made up by us? I mean, dinner etiquette might be a special kind of example. Does the shape of the earth, scientific claims, observations about common sense, observations about our surroundings, do they work this way? I think you're going to think not. But get the definition clear. Perception as reality does seem to mean that for everyone to believe something is the same thing as it being true. There's no light between these two, according to this definition. Again, that's what it would mean to say literally, perception is reality, to take it literally. So, by the way, the counter view, general absolutism, well, that's going to be we could write that one very simply as just P1 does not mean P2. So what's general absolutism going to be a claim about? Well, general absolutism will be the claim that, look, we could all believe something, but there's a separate issue as to whether it's true. We could all believe the earth is flat. Does that make it flat? In general absolutism, just say, our believing something is not the same thing as it being true. Now, with dinner etiquette, it might feel that way. But we're not concerned with dinner etiquette right now. We're concerned with, in general, truth in general, reality, truth in general. And then we'll be concerned with moral claims, but I think you're going to think even moral claims don't work like dinner etiquette. That's what we'll have to see. That'll be the more challenging part of this discussion. The not so challenging part probably is going to be showing that general relativism is just going to run into immediate and huge problems as soon as you start thinking about simple, ordinary claims. Your friend, remember, wanted to talk about, suppose in 600 AD, everybody thinks the earth is flat. The fact of the matter is your friend probably needs to go back to 600 BC. It was understood by lots of people that the earth was spherical, but probably not maybe prior to 600 BC, but by 600 AD, that was not so unusual. So let your friend say, well, in 600 BC, there must have been a time in the past when everybody thought the earth was flat, because it's kind of hard to understand it as spherical unless you get some pretty serious science going. It's hard to understand the earth hurtling around the sun, for instance, until you get some fairly sophisticated science. One might have wondered why the trees aren't moving. Why isn't there a cosmic wind blowing at a very high velocity if we're hurtling around the sun? You needed a concept that came to be known as inertia to get past that. And that concept hadn't been well understood early on. So inertia, I remember hearing about inertia as a kid and thinking it seemed clearly false, right? The notion of inertia, you remember this? Inertia is that when an object is in motion, it tends to stay in motion unless some force is exerted against it. I remember being a kid and thinking, false. things that are in motion tend to stop being in motion unless some force is exerted to keep them in motion. The exact opposite is what seemed true. So look, it took some sophisticated physics before you could get certain views up and running, not just about the Earth being spherical, but being spherical and hurtling around the sun. The ancient Greeks had reasons for thinking the Earth was spherical 2,500 years ago. They'd see a ship's mast come up from a long way away, and it would kind of come up like that, as if the Earth had a curvature. They'd see eclipses, and they'd see the shadow of the Earth, and it seemed like maybe that was in favor of it being spherical. So a number of things that one might have been able to cite going back 2,500 years at least. But once you get back beyond, 600 BC, for instance, pretty hard to have the view. I mean, pretty easy to have the view that the Earth is flat. So, okay, let's imagine some time in the past when everybody thought the Earth was flat. Everybody believed S1. So here's what you have to ask your relativist friend. Okay, in 600 BC, when everyone believed S1, did that make it true? Is it your view? Now I'm going to bear down on these arguments a little bit when I come back, but I'm just going to throw this out at you to just kind of get your intuitions flowing here a little bit. You say to your general relativist friend, in 600 BC, when everybody thought S1, do you think that that made the Earth flat? Was the Earth flat in 600 BC? Is that your view? And they're going to say stuff like, well, that's what they thought. You're going to go, I know that's what they thought. I got that part. Everyone believed it. I'm asking, did that make it true? Do you think that the Earth actually was flat? Well, you should be humble because they're just as smart as you, and they had their perceptions that they were bringing together to formulate this view. And what are you being arrogant about? Like you've got the truth and they didn't? No, I get all that. You say to your friend, I get that they believed it, and I get that they were smart, and I get that they were putting together the perceptions that they had. But is it your view that in fact they were correct? Well, you should respect the diversity of the change of views over time. Got it. We should be humble and respectful of the diversity and tolerant of the different views that people have thought were true over time. But that's not the question. The question you're asking your friend is, when everyone believed it, is it your view that at that moment it was true that the Earth was flat? And the only answer that the general relativist can give here is not, well, they were doing their best, got it. Well, you should be humble because they're just as smart as you, got it. Well, you should realize that people in 10,000 years are going to look back on you, got it all. The only answer that the general relativist is going to be able to give here is simply yes. When the question is, did everybody believing it make it true? Is it your view that the Earth was flat in 600 BC? The only answer that the general relativist is going to be able to give, given this definition, is yes. They were as correct as we are. As correct. Now, is that your view? I'm asking you now. Is that your view? Again, we'll come back with, the arguments get worse from here for the general relativist, but I'm just suggesting, is it your view that the shape of the Earth is like dinner etiquette? That when we say it, it makes it true? Probably that's not your view. Probably what you want to say about people in 600 BC is something like this maybe. Look, they were doing their best. They were very smart. I'm respectful of what they did. I realize that I've just got my limited view on reality as well, and people are going to look back on us in 10,000 years. I realize that there's a diversity of views that evolves over time. I realize all of that, but respectfully and humbly, I would say, it looks like the people in 600 BC were mistaken. Now, do I know that for sure? No, I don't know that for sure. Could I be wrong about the shape of the earth? Yes, of course. Of course I could be wrong about the shape. We could all be wrong about the shape of the earth. I mean, that could happen, right? How could we be wrong about the shape of the earth? Think about that for a second. Could the earth really not be spherical even though we think it is? Yeah, of course. Suppose we change our theory of optics in 10,000 years. We got all these pictures of the earth, right? And it makes the earth look spherical. But maybe light doesn't travel through space the way we thought it did. Maybe we change our theory of optics, our theory of how light moves. And in fact, the way you do a little experiment when you're in grade school and you put a pencil in water, a jar of water, and it looks like it's broken, but it's not. You pull the pencil out, it's fine. You put it in the water, it looks like it's broken. Because of the way light moves through the two media, air and water, it makes the pencil look broken, and there's nothing you can do to change that. You can look at the pencil till the cows come home. It's always going to look broken. It's not. Looks like it is. Is it possible that we'll realize that Earth, the shape of the Earth as we photograph it from space, is some kind of optical illusion because light doesn't move the way light curves in a way that we didn't understand in the vacuum of space, as opposed to in the atmosphere of where we live normally? Yes, I mean, you can't act like it's not possible that we could be wrong about the shape of the earth. I mean, science does change. We could be wrong about the shape of the earth, not for the least of which reasons we could change our view of optics and how light moves. So when your friend says, we could be wrong, you say, I know that, but it looks like they were. And I have my reasons for thinking that the people in 600 BC were wrong about S1. Am I sure? No, that's the wrong question. The question is not, am I sure? The question is, do I think they were correct, or do I think, with all respect and humility, that it looks like maybe they didn't have access to some stuff we have access to, and that therefore it looks like they were mistaken? You know who can't say that? The general relativist. They cannot believe or say that it looks like they were mistaken about the shape of the earth, because general relativism is the claim that if they perceived it to be flat, then it is as true can get, that it was flat. Again, dinner etiquette might work that way. Shape of the earth? Doesn't seem like it does, right? Okay, let me stop. I'm gonna pause here and end this set, getting us started with cultural moral relativism and moral absolutism, and now pursuing this in slightly more detail. I'll come back. I'll still be talking about this reading and this discussion, but I want to make a couple of more arguments that are even worse for the general relativist that I think you'll find compelling. Things you'd have to say if you were a general relativist that you probably don't think are true. And then, let's toy with some more statements. What about statements that are sort of culturally sensitive? Like, suppose one culture thinks germs make you sick and another culture doesn't. What do we do with that? Is there an absolute truth about that? Or is the truth of germs relative to what people believe? And then religious claims, right? How about those? If someone thinks Jesus got up from the dead and someone else thinks Jesus didn't get up from the dead, is there a fact about that? Is there, or does somehow you want, or do you want to somehow get relativistic about religious claims? Like, well, religious claims, if you believe Jesus got up from the dead, then Jesus got up from the dead. And then you mumble something like, for you. I don't know what that for you is doing exactly there. I think you're going to think religious claims are going to work just like claims about germs or sickness as viewed from one culture to another, for instance. And I think you're going to think they all work just like sentences about the shape of the earth and electrons and rocks and trees. So let's see how you feel about it. I'll walk you through it, but I'm going to stop now and come back and finish up the problems with general relativism and then we'll get back and pursue this matter of, well, what about moral claims? Maybe I don't want to be a general relativist. Maybe I don't want to be a relativist about sentences like these, but maybe I still want to be a relativist about short shorts being wrong. Is that possible? Can I be an absolutist about these and then turn around and be a relativist about those? What we're doing here is going to be training for handling cultural moral relativism. That's the other reason I'm bothering to go through this first discussion about general relativism. It might be surprising to you, but what goes wrong with general relativism is gonna probably seem to you to be the same sorts of things that go wrong with cultural moral relativism, but we'll see. Okay, I hope all is well. Sorry to be talking so much. I know I'd love for us to all be in the room together, so that I'm not doing all the talking, but see what you think about this, and we'll pick it up again shortly.